If you were to ask me whether Chinese was a difficult language, I would say no. It's not as hard as you think it is. But wait, why did I have to say no so many times? Why didn't I just say no, it's not? Why did I have to say no, it's not? What does that repetition do? When an expression is repeated in succession in a language, it is known as reduplication. And reduplication is a process that is very productive in Chinese. So today we're going to talk about reduplication across different word classes in Chinese. Reduplication of adjectives, reduplication of verbs, and reduplication of measure words. Before we dive in though, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Let's begin with adjectives. What happens when you reduplicate an adjective in Chinese? For example, if I were to say an apple is sweet, I could simply say 苹果很甜. Or I could reduplicate the 甜 and say 苹果甜甜的. Now, what's the difference between 苹果很甜 and 苹果甜甜的? If you were to look this up in a textbook or grammar book, often they would tell you that this sort of reduplication serves to make the expression more vivid. But what exactly does more vivid mean? And when would you want to make the expression more vivid? Well, more vivid in this sense often means exaggeration of sensual perceptions. Sensual perceptions meaning the five senses, such as visual perception, auditory perception, perceptions of smell, perceptions of taste, perceptions of touch. Any kind of thing that you feel with your five senses and you want to exaggerate that, the way to do it would be to reduplicate the adjective. Another way to look at it is when you reduplicate the adjective in Chinese, it heightens the emotional dimension of your description. So 苹果很甜 would be more of a plain objective description, whereas 苹果甜甜的 would be a more involved emotional description of what I am experiencing. Now, when would you use the more involved expression? You would use it to signal that I'm very excited about what I'm describing to you. You would use it when I want to get you to feel what I'm feeling. Okay, in that sort of situation, that is when I would say 苹果甜甜的. That is when I would reduplicate the adjective. Now, when would I not use reduplication? If I'm writing a government missive or an academic thesis where I'm supposed to be objective and respectable, then I would avoid using that sort of overly emotional expression. Detached voice. Police describe the suspect as having small eyes and big ears.
警方称嫌犯眼睛小，耳朵大。
Emotional voice. He's got these teeny weeny eyes and big flapping ears.
他眼睛小小的，耳朵大大的。
Now, not all adjectives in Chinese can be reduplicated in this way. For one, in order to reduplicate the adjective has to be gradable. That is to say, it has to have different shades of gray instead of being something that is black or white. So take an adjective like 对 or 错 for something to be right or wrong. Right and wrong is a black and white situation, right? So you cannot say 这个答案对对的. Okay, it's not gradable, so you simply cannot reduplicate the 对. Similarly, I cannot say 你的看法错错的. Again, 错, wrong, is a black and white judgment, so 错 cannot be reduplicated. Any adjective that is not gradable cannot be reduplicated. Another thing is, since with reduplication we're trying to heighten the sensation that we're heightening has to be something that is grounded, something that can be felt. It cannot be something that is purely in the abstract. So I'll give you some examples. When you talk about an exam question being difficult, difficult is not something you can smell or hear or see with your eyes. It's something more on the abstract level. So you cannot say 这个问题难难的. Okay, that simply would not work. Or when you go to a store and you see an item that is expensive. Being cheap or expensive, again, is not something that you can feel sensually. So you cannot say 这件衣服贵贵的. So adjectives that describe abstract properties such as expensive or difficult, these cannot be reduplicated. So far we've only been dealing with adjectives that are monosyllabic, adjectives that have only one syllable. such as 甜 or 贵 or 难. What happens if the adjective has more than one syllable? What if the adjective has two syllables, such as 干净 or 漂亮 or 冷清? Well, what happens in this case is you repeat both of these syllables, but in the format of AABB. That is, you repeat the first syllable twice, and then you repeat the second syllable twice. So if you wanted to reduplicate 干净, you would say 干干净净, 这件衣服干干净净的. If you wanted to reduplicate 漂亮, you would say 漂漂亮亮, 你写的字漂漂亮亮的. Okay, you repeat it in the format of AABB. But again, not all disyllabic adjectives can be reduplicated in this way. Typically, only disyllabic adjectives that have a coordinated structure, that is, when the two syllables are both adjectives, only in this situation can you repeat it in the format of AABB. If it has some other structure, such as a modifier head structure, then sometimes reduplication is not allowed. For example, when something is cute, 可爱, you cannot say 这只小狗可可爱爱的. When a class is boring, you cannot say 这门课无无聊聊的. Okay. In these situations, you simply cannot reduplicate the adjective. Although in some situations, again, you can. For example, when somebody is doing something really carefully, 小心, you could say 他小小心心地做这件事情. When somebody looks handsome, you could say 他看起来帅帅气气的. So when it's not a coordinated structure, sometimes you're able to reduplicate in the format of AABB, sometimes you cannot. Let's talk about the reduplication of verbs now. The reduplication of verbs ties in somewhat with the notion of iconicity that we talked about in one of our earlier chapters. Iconicity means that the language mirrors the real-life situation that we're trying to describe in some sort of way. So think about it. When we repeat a verb, when we repeat an action, what does that indicate in terms of what we're trying to describe? It may indicate that the action that we're trying to describe is repetitive in some sort of way. So we tend to reduplicate the verb in situations where there is more than one instance of the action. For example, he patted me on the head. 他摸摸我的头. It's more than one touch. It's repetitive touching. So, 摸摸我的头. Or when you pat somebody on the shoulder. 他拍拍我的肩膀. Again, it's more than one pat. So, 拍拍我的肩膀. The action 拍 is reduplicated. So in terms of iconicity, that's one way to look at the reduplication of verbs. But there's more than that. There's another kind of situation in which the action would be repetitive. And that is when you're not very sure of yourself, when the action that you're performing is hesitant in some sort of way. When you're not sure, you try and then pull back and then try again. Okay, so that sort of hesitation is a sort of repetition. Now, when would we show this sort of hesitation? When you're not very sure about a request that you're making. Or when you want to be polite by not coming on too strong and making your request seem hesitant. Instead of saying, can I borrow your pen? You want to soften the request by saying, could I possibly borrow your pen for a minute? I'm using the possibly to soften it. I'm using the a minute at the end to soften it. And in Chinese, you would achieve the same purpose by repeating the verb. So, 我可不可以借借你的笔? Okay, 借借, reduplicating the 借 to borrow makes it softer than just a single 借. 我能不能借你的笔? Okay, so repeating the verb softens the request. 我们出去走走好不好? How about we go out for a walk? Again, I'm making a request, and in order to make it less threatening, I am appearing hesitant, 走走, so that if you were to reject me, I would feel less offended. So that would be the main purpose of reduplicating a verb in Chinese, to soften a request. Now, when the verb is followed by an object, you reduplicate only the verb and not the noun that follows it. If I were to suggest that we chat for a bit, 我们聊聊天好不好? I would reduplicate the 聊 but not the 天 in 聊天. 我们聊聊天。If I wanted you to go take a bath, 你去洗洗澡，好不好？ Okay, for 洗澡, again, I repeat the 洗, but not the 澡。For verbs that have more than one syllable, disyllabic verbs, for example, then you would repeat both syllables in the verb, but you would repeat it in the format A, B, A, B. So, for example, 讨论, to discuss. If I wanted for us to discuss for a bit, I would say 我们讨论讨论，好不好？ Okay, reduplicating 讨论 gives 讨论讨论。If I wanted you to go rest for a bit, I would say 你去休息休息吧。Reduplicating 休息 gives 休息休息。Notice how with the reduplication of disyllabic verbs, the format is different from the reduplication of disyllabic adjectives. With disyllabic adjectives, you get the format AABB. 干净 becomes 干干净净，漂亮 becomes 漂漂亮亮。With reduplicated verbs, the reduplicated format is ABAB. 休息 becomes 休息休息，讨论 becomes 讨论讨论。Finally, let's talk about reduplicated nouns. Generally speaking, nouns do not get reduplicated in Chinese. Okay, there are rare instances where you could reduplicate a noun such as 人. So, for example, 人人都想进我们学校. Everybody wants to enter our school. Okay, in that rare exception, it's okay to reduplicate the 人. But this is not a productive process. So, for example, if I wanted to say every student wants to enter our school, I cannot say 学生都想进我们学校, or every teacher wants to enter our school. 老师都想进我们学校. That simply does not work. So in most cases, you cannot reduplicate the noun in Chinese. But that's not to say reduplication doesn't apply to the notion of nouns. When you want to reduplicate a noun, the thing that you do is to reduplicate not the noun, but the measure word or the classifier for the noun. So for example, if I wanted to say that every student wants to enter our school, instead of reduplicating 学生, I would reduplicate the classifier 个. So I would say 学生个个都想进我们学校. And what the reduplication of that classifier 个 does is it has the meaning of every one, every single one. Okay, when you reduplicate the classifier, it has that meaning. 学生个个都想进我们学校. Similarly, I could say 老师个个都想进我们学校. Every teacher wants to enter our school. And that meaning of every is achieved by reduplicating the measure word 个. If I wanted to say I applied to a lot of schools, but every one of them rejected me, then I would have to reduplicate the measure word of school, which in this case could be 间. 我申请了很多学校，可是间间都不收我。If I had a lot of money in my wallet, and every one of these is a $100 bill, I could say, 我手上的钱，张张都是100元大钞. Okay, the measure word for paper bills is 张, and each and every one, 张张, 张张都是100元. There's a saying in Chinese that was probably translated from the English, all roads lead to Rome. All roads lead to Rome. How do we express the notion of all roads? In Chinese, the way to do it is to reduplicate the measure word of road, which is 条. So all roads lead to Rome is 条条大路通罗马. So to recap, when it comes to reduplication, in Chinese, adjectives and adverbs can be reduplicated, verbs can be reduplicated, and classifiers for nouns can be reduplicated. But when they're reduplicated, they serve different purposes. When an adjective or adverb is reduplicated, it serves to heighten the sensual perception, making the description more emotional and more involved. When a verb is reduplicated, it makes the action more hesitant, making a request softer and more polite. And finally, when the classifier for a noun is reduplicated, what it does is it has the meaning of every single one. So that's reduplication for you in the Chinese language. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I'll see you next time.